Hands up, how did two broke black girls like you get an SUV like this? Did you steal it or sell something filthy? The white cop sneered, threw the two black women's documents into the oil, and ordered them to kneel and pick them up. But he had no idea that Simone was an FBI agent who specialized in hunting corrupt cops, or that her younger sister Serena was a federal judge. By the time his partners began searching them, Simone had already activated the emergency button on her watch. So who was really about to be forced to their knees? And which state are you watching from? Leave a comment. Let every voice unite into a fire that burns racial oppression to the ground. Simone Brooks, an FBI agent specializing in civil rights violations, and Serena Brooks, her twin sister who served as a federal judge, grew up in a small brick house on the south side of Atlanta. They were raised by Gloria Brooks, their biological mother, and only source of support after their father was killed in a scaffolding collapse. Simone and Serena were only 8 years old at the time. The construction company blamed the accident on worker error, refused to pay compensation, and closed the case before Gloria even understood how she could challenge the decision. She buried her husband on Monday morning, returned to her job at the school library on Wednesday, and then took on additional night shifts at a grocery store. Her two daughters rarely saw their mother get enough sleep, but they never once heard her complain. Gloria had only one rule. Her daughters had to be better, calmer, and more prepared than everyone else. Not because they were inferior, but because society would always demand more evidence from them before it was willing to believe them. When other people are allowed to make one mistake, you may not be allowed to make any, she often said. Simone learned to observe before taking action. Serena learned to turn her anger into questions no one could easily evade. They had different personalities, but both were shaped by the same warning, Gloria repeated, before every exam, every interview, and every time her daughters walked out the door. When they were 15, that warning became reality. Simone and Serena had just left the library when two police officers stopped them in front of a crowded store. No explanation, no description of a suspect. Only orders to place their hands against the wall and open their bags. Serena's books, pens, and essay were dumped into a puddle beside the road. One officer read several lines from her journal aloud, making the people standing nearby laugh. They found nothing. They did not apologize. Serena cried the entire way home, haunted by one question: who had the authority to hold those who wore badges accountable? Simone did not cry. She memorized their names, badge numbers, and patrol car license plate before bending down to pick up every wet page. That night, the sisters chose two different paths. Serena decided to study law so she could become someone capable of forcing those in power to answer to justice. Simone wanted to directly uncover those who used their badges as shields for cruelty. Years later, Serena took the bench at the United States District Court for the Southern District of Alabama. Simone joined the FBI unit investigating civil rights violations and police corruption. Her work took her into secret meetings, police departments that concealed records, and encounters with men who believed their uniforms could protect them from every consequence. That was why Simone always wore a black watch equipped with a tracking device, an encrypted recorder, and an emergency signal button. She had never needed to use it. Gloria had recently undergone heart surgery at a hospital in Mobile. On the morning she was scheduled to be discharged, Serena drove her newly purchased dark blue luxury SUV to pick up Simone. Both women were dressed casually in jeans, t-shirts, and flats. No suits, no badge, nothing to suggest that one of them could mobilize the FBI while the other could command a federal courtroom. Simone placed a box of peach pastries and Gloria's favorite knitted blanket in the trunk. Serena called their mother and promised they would arrive before the discharge process began. Gloria replied that if the pastries were no longer warm, she would refuse to accept either of her daughters. The laughter of the mother and her two daughters filled the vehicle so light that no one could have imagined the journey was about to drag them back to the wound they had suffered at 15. A collision forced authorities to close the highway ahead. The navigation system redirected them onto a two-lane road passing through Red Hollow, a small town with old churches, shuttered diners, and fields stretching beneath the sun. Simone noticed a patrol car parked beneath a tree as they passed. The driver raised his head. The police car pulled out several seconds later and maintained the same distance behind them through 3 turns. Serena said they were probably heading in the same direction. Simone did not respond. She merely watched the rearview mirror and gently pulled down her sleeve to conceal the watch. When Serena turned into a deserted gas station, the patrol car did not continue down the road. It stopped across the street. Behind the windshield, all 3 officers turned their heads and stared at the sisters. Serena pulled the SUV up beside pump number 3 at Red Hollow Fuel and Mart. The gas station stood apart from the residential area wedged between the two-lane road and fields of sun-scorched yellow grass. A faded sign swayed gently from two chains. An old ice machine rattled beside the wall. There were no houses or other businesses in sight. Serena turned off the engine, stepped out, and picked up the gas nozzle. Simone looked across the hood toward the patrol car on the other side of the road. It remained beneath the shade of the trees. 3 figures were still sitting behind the windshield. Simone went inside the store to buy water. The bell above the door made a dry, clanging sound. Inside, an elderly man was scratching a lottery ticket, while a young woman holding a baby stood near the counter. Both watched Simone enter, then immediately looked away. The cashier, a gray-haired woman wearing a faded name tag, did not greet her. Simone picked up 2 bottles of water and a package of the butter cookies Gloria liked. When she placed them on the counter, the cashier merely stated the total, keeping her eyes on the register. The silence inside the store did not feel like indifference. It felt like a warning. Simone paid, took the bag, and walked outside. Serena was leaning against the vehicle with her phone on speaker. "We'll be there before your discharge," she said. Gloria's voice came through the phone, weaker than it had been before the surgery, but still filled with authority. "And where are my peach pastries?" Simone held up the bag. "In the trunk, untouched." Gloria immediately asked whether they were still warm. Serena laughed and said they could not drive for 3 hours while keeping pastries as fresh as if they had just come out of the oven. "Then the 2 of you should learn how to solve problems," Gloria replied. Simone shook her head. "You just had heart surgery and you still have enough strength to put pressure on me." Gloria laughed. The sound made both sisters smile. Simone's smile disappeared when she looked across the road. The man behind the wheel was Lieutenant Travis Cole, commander of the Red Hollow Patrol Shift. Officer Mason Pike sat in the front passenger seat, younger, and constantly chewing gum. In the back, Officer Eli Rourke sat with his arms crossed his eyes, never leaving Serena. Simone had read their names on their badges when the patrol car followed them from the highway. None of the 3 officers was watching traffic. They were watching only the 2 sisters. Simone moved closer to Serena. "End the call. Stay calm." She discreetly touched the face of the watch beneath her sleeve. The screen illuminated, then went dark. The device was still active. Serena had just replaced the gas cap when the patrol car began to move. No siren, no lights. It slowly crossed the road, turned into the station, and parked diagonally behind the SUV, completely blocking its path. All 3 doors opened almost simultaneously. Cole stepped out first, adjusted his belt, and approached. "Step away from the vehicle, both of you." He offered no greeting or explanation. Serena placed her phone inside the SUV and stood upright. Cole demanded her driver's license and registration. When he saw the name Serena Brooks on the documents, he looked at the SUV and then back at her. "This your vehicle?" Serena confirmed that it was. "You bought it yourself?" Again, she answered yes. Cole turned toward his 2 subordinates. Pike smirked and said that vehicles like this often disappeared from Birmingham before turning up in small towns with very convincing paperwork. Rourke asked whether the sisters were carrying cash or anything valuable inside the SUV. Serena said the registration was entirely valid. Cole did not return the documents. He asked what she did for a living, how much she earned, and who had actually paid for the vehicle. The sisters did not reveal their positions. Simone merely asked, "Are we being detained or are we free to leave?" Cole stepped closer. His breath smelled of cigarettes. "In Red Hollow, you leave when I say you can leave." Then he suddenly threw the license and registration into a puddle of oil at Serena's feet. "Get on your knees," Cole said. "Pick them up." Serena looked at her driver's license lying in the streak of black oil. One corner of the registration was already soaked. She wanted to remain standing, but Cole's hand was resting near his holster. Simone gave a slight shake of her head. It was only a small movement, just enough for her sister to understand that this was not yet the time to resist. Serena bent down and picked up each document while the 3 officers looked down at her. Pike laughed when her knee touched the concrete. Cole tilted his head, savoring the sight longer than necessary. "That's right, little girl," he said. "Good girl." Serena tightened her grip on the documents. Oil seeped between her fingers, slick and hot. Simone kept her hands where the officers could see them. She realized that Cole did not merely want to inspect the vehicle. He wanted a reaction, a raised voice, an arm jerking away, anything that could be written as resistance in his report. She watched Pike return to the patrol car and read the license plate number over the radio. Less than a minute later, a female dispatcher confirmed that the SUV had not been reported stolen. Serena was its lawful owner, neither sister had any outstanding warrants, and the vehicle was not connected to any traffic violation. Every reason to detain them had disappeared. Cole still did not return the documents. "Your behavior is making me suspicious," he said. Serena asked what behavior he meant. Cole did not answer. He ordered Pike to run the license plate again. Pike pointed out that the results were already clear, but Cole merely stared at him until he picked up the radio. 5 minutes passed. The sun beat directly down on pump number 3. Simone's shirt clung to her back. Sweat ran along Serena's temple while the 3 officers stood in the shade beneath the canopy. Rourke approached, spat out his gum a few inches from the toe of Serena's shoe, and moved so close that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. A pickup truck pulled into the station. The man behind the wheel saw 2 black women standing before 3 police officers, slowed for a moment, then chose the farthest pump. Another family emerged from the store, hurried their young child into the car, and drove away without asking any questions. Simone had seen this scene in dozens of case files. Bystanders always noticed. They saw hands placed on vehicles, tense faces, and officers standing too close. But the uniforms made everything appear lawful. For most passers-by, that was enough to make them keep moving. The second check produced exactly the same results as the first. Cole lit a cigarette and said that a clean license plate did not mean the sisters were not hiding something else. He demanded permission to search the SUV. Serena immediately replied, "I do not consent." Cole smiled as though her refusal were precisely what he had been waiting for. While he turned to give Pike an order, Simone gently pulled back her sleeve. Her thumb pressed and held the button on the side of her watch. A brief vibration touched her wrist. The emergency signal had been sent. From that moment on, her coordinates would be transmitted to the FBI Operations Center every 30 seconds. Simone did not tell Serena. A single, accidental glance toward the watch could alert Cole. Pike opened the SUV door without permission. He searched the glove compartment, reached beneath the seats, and opened every bag. Sunglasses, charging cables, tissues, and Gloria's medication were thrown onto the concrete. He found no drugs, weapons, or anything else illegal. "The vehicle is clean," Pike said. Cole took a drag from his cigarette and looked at the sisters as though the result had personally offended him, then searched them. He raised his chin. Pike lunged toward Simone. Rourke seized Serena. Their arms were twisted behind their backs. Before Serena could cry out, both sisters' faces were forced down against the scorching hood of the patrol car. Pike pulled Simone's hands behind her back and tightened the handcuffs until the metal edges cut into the bones of her wrists. Beside her, Rourke did the same to Serena. 2 sharp locking sounds rang out almost simultaneously. The hood of the patrol car had been baking beneath the sun for hours. The moment Simone's cheek touched it, the heat immediately seared through her skin. Serena tried to turn her head away from the metal, but Rourke forced her shoulder lower. Her forearm scraped against the scorching paint. A sharp gasp escaped her. Cole stood in the shade of the open car door, watching calmly. "What are we being arrested for?" Serena asked. Her voice trembled, but every word remained clear. Cole laughed. "Who said you're under arrest?" He explained that they were only being detained and handcuffed for officer safety. Serena turned her head just enough to look at him. She said that the license plate had been verified. They had committed no traffic violation, the vehicle had been searched without consent, and handcuffs could not be used to punish someone who posed no threat. Cole approached. "Listen to the little girl," he said to his 2 subordinates. "She learned a few words online and thinks she's a judge." He had no idea that the woman being pinned against the hood was in fact a federal judge. Serena was about to respond, but Cole placed his hand on the back of her neck. He did not squeeze. He merely held it there, heavy and deliberate. He leaned down until his tobacco-scented breath touched her ear. "Say one more word," Cole whispered, "and I'll give you a real reason to need a lawyer." Serena's fingers curled behind her back, her lips pressed tightly together. Cole kept his hand there for several more seconds before removing it and wiping it on his pants as though he had just touched something filthy. Every muscle in Simone's body urged her to fight back. Her training forced her to remain still. The FBI team needed time to assess the situation, deploy personnel, and approach without alerting the local police. She silently counted from the moment the watch had vibrated against her wrist. 9 minutes. Her coordinates had already been transmitted 18 times. A sedan slowed on the road. Its driver looked at the handcuffed sisters, then accelerated. A delivery truck passed next. The driver turned his head to watch, but did not stop either. The uniforms made violence look like procedure. No one wanted to be the person who asked questions. Pike returned to the SUV and opened the trunk. He pulled out the box of peach pastries, first tilting it so the filling inside slid to one side. Next came the knitted blanket Gloria used whenever she felt cold, her hospital discharge papers, and a cream-colored envelope bearing her name. Pike opened the envelope despite Serena ordering him to stop. He removed the card and read it aloud. Dear Mom, your newly repaired heart still doesn't give you the right to boss your two daughters around. But today you can try. Love, Simone and Serena. Pike looked at Cole and laughed. Rourke asked whether they should call the hospital and let them know that the two dutiful daughters were busy. Cole said Gloria needed to learn how to wait. Serena's breathing became short and rapid. It was not only the handcuffs or the heat that sent her into a panic. It was watching something private meant for their mother being turned into entertainment while she was unable to take it back. Simone, she whispered. I can't take this. Simone shifted her hand until her little finger touched her sister's wrist. Remember what Mom taught us, she said. Stay calm. Remember every face. Serena closed her eyes and tried to bring each breath back under control. Pike had searched the entire SUV. No weapons, no drugs, nothing that could justify what they were doing. Cole knew that, but he had no intention of stopping. He crushed his cigarette against the concrete. If the vehicle is clean, he said, then maybe what they're hiding is on them. Pike and Rourke pulled rubber gloves from their belts. Cole watched them put the gloves on, then ordered, search them one at a time, very slowly and very thoroughly. The snap of Pike's rubber gloves against his wrists echoed through the gas station. He placed both hands on Simone's shoulders, ran them down her arms, then moved toward her sides. A proper safety pat-down required only a quick check to determine whether a detainee was carrying a weapon. But Pike pressed his fingers into her body, moving slowly and lingering in places where there was no need to search. Simone clenched her teeth. Stop, she said. Pike turned toward Cole as though waiting for instructions. Cole stood with his arms crossed in the shade, his eyes never leaving her. She seems nervous, he said. Search her again, more thoroughly this time. Pike started again at her shoulders. His hands followed the same path, only more slowly. When he reached her waist, his fingers slipped beneath the hem of Simone's shirt and touched her bare skin. Her abdominal muscles tightened. A small sound escaped her throat before she could stop it. Simone looked down at the hood. There was a crescent-shaped scratch in the silver paint. She counted every jagged line along its edge, forcing her mind to focus on it instead of the hands violating her body. At the same time, she memorized everything. Pike used his right hand. Cole ordered the second search. Rourke stood less than a step away from Serena. No one gave any reason related to weapons. Serena heard the tremor in her sister's breathing. She jerked her wrists inside the handcuffs, causing the metal edges to bite deeper into her skin. Stop touching her. Pike did not stop. Serena raised her voice. You are conducting an unlawful search. Take your hands off her right now. Cole laughed as though he had just heard a childish threat. Or what little girl? Serena turned her head to look at him. Or you will pay for every second of this. Cole's smile turned cold. He raised his chin toward Rourke. Her turn. Let's see what our imaginary judge is hiding. Rourke seized Serena by the shoulder and turned her forward. He pulled her collar and one side of her shirt out of place, claiming that he needed to see whether she had concealed anything inside. When Serena tried to stand upright, his hand clamped onto the back of her neck and forced her against the hood again. Cole made filthy remarks about her clothes, her body, and the kind of man who might have bought the vehicle for her. Serena closed her eyes. Her fingernails scraped across the paint, leaving thin white lines. Shame surged through her, not because she had done anything wrong, but because three men were trying to place the guilt for their own actions onto her body. Simone saw her sister trembling and forced every detail into her memory. Pike pulled his personal phone from his pocket. He angled it so that the handcuffed Serena in her displaced clothing filled the center of the frame. The shutter clicked. Evidence, he said, then showed the photograph to Cole. Cole laughed. Rourke released Serena's neck with one hand, took out his own phone, and captured another photograph from a lower angle. Pike told him to include the SUV clearly in the background to document the property. A second shutter sounded. All three men laughed and joked as though it were entertainment during their shift. They did not understand that every photograph carried the time, location, and digital fingerprint of the device that created it. Simone memorized both phones, the order in which the photographs were taken, and who held each device. Pike took the first picture, Rourke took the second. Cole watched, encouraged them, and did nothing to stop them. Pike swiped across the screen to review the image. For 1 second, Simone saw a data sync icon in the corner. The photograph might already have been backed up to a cloud account. Deleting it from the phone would not be enough. Meanwhile, the watch remained pressed between her wrist and the handcuff, silently recording every word and transmitting her location to the FBI every 30 seconds. Nearly 14 minutes had passed. The response team had to be on its way, but there were still no lights or engine sounds on the two-lane road. Simone was no longer merely waiting to be rescued. In her mind, she had already begun constructing the case: detention without cause, unlawful vehicle search, excessive force, invasive physical searches, photographing the victims, and conspiring to conceal everything under the authority of their office. She listened to the three men laughing, then stopped, staring at the scratch on the hood. Lieutenant Cole. Her voice was flat, cold, and precise. Cole froze. Not because she had spoken his rank, but because of the way she said it. The woman before him no longer sounded like a victim begging for mercy. Simone turned her head just enough to look directly at him. The watch on my wrist has been transmitting my location and recording all three of you for the past 14 minutes. She paused, allowing the silence to swallow the remnants of their laughter. I investigate cops like you for a living. The smile vanished from Cole's face. Pike was still holding his phone, but his hand had dropped to his side. Rourke kept his hand on the back of Serena's neck, but no longer dared to apply pressure. Simone looked at each of them in turn. I am Special Agent Simone Brooks, badge number 4817, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Civil Rights and Public Integrity Unit. Her voice was not loud, but every word fell across the gas station as clearly as an indictment. I specialize in investigating corruption, unlawful use of force, and police abuse of authority. She slightly raised her handcuffed wrist. This watch makes encrypted recordings. Once activated, it transmits my location to the operations center every 30 seconds and stores a copy of the audio on a federal server. You're lying, Cole answered too quickly. Simone recited his full name, rank, unit, and the number of the patrol car parked behind them. She also cited the time the vehicle had begun following them, the 2 times Pike had run the license plate, and every order Cole had given. The color drained from his face. Pike backed away from Simone and tore off his gloves, as though the rubber itself could incriminate him. Rourke immediately released Serena, nearly causing her to slide off the hood. No one removed the handcuffs. No one was laughing anymore. Cole tried to regain control. He said this had merely been a lawful stop based on suspicious behavior. The searches had been conducted by his subordinates for officer safety, and he had not seen Pike and Rourke cross the line. Simone looked directly at him. You ordered the vehicle searched after the license plate was verified twice. You ordered us handcuffed. You ordered a second search. You stood there while they took photographs. She angled her wrist toward the watch. Your voice is on every order. Do not blame the men who did exactly what you told them to do. Serena raised her head from the hood. Her hair was disheveled and clung to her sweat-covered face. One side of her clothing was still pulled out of place. A thin line of blood ran from her wrist to the back of her hand, but when she spoke, her voice carried the tone that had once silenced an entire courtroom. My name is Serena Brooks. I am a judge of the United States District Court for the Southern District of Alabama. Pike opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. Serena correctly named every act they had committed: unlawful detention, a vehicle search without probable cause, excessive use of force, invasion of privacy, an unlawful body search, and assault under color of law. This case will go before a federal grand jury, Serena said. Not the town court, not a place where you know the clerk or share coffee with the prosecutor. You will not control who reviews the evidence. Pike began shaking his head. He said that he had only been following orders and that Cole had instructed him to conduct the second search. Rourke immediately insisted that Pike had started everything and that he had only helped restrain them. The 3 men who had once stood on the same side now moved away from one another, each trying to place the blame in someone else's hands. Cole turned toward Pike. Delete the pictures. Pike looked down at his phone. Simone immediately warned him, if you touch any file, that act will be documented as destruction of evidence and obstruction of federal justice. Pike's finger froze above the screen. Then they all heard engines approaching from the north. The sound grew louder, fast, and heavy. 2 black SUVs raced off the 2-lane road, turned into the gas station, and stopped at angles that boxed in the patrol car. No sirens, no lights, only speed and purpose. The doors flew open. Special Agent Dana Whitfield, Simone's direct supervisor, stepped out first with a rapid response team wearing body armor. She walked straight toward the sisters. One agent removed Simone's handcuffs while another freed Serena. When Serena stood, her knees buckled. Simone caught her even though her own hands were still trembling. Cole instinctively reached toward his holster. Whitfield immediately aimed her weapon at him. Hands up, right now. Cole froze, then slowly raised his hands. Whitfield ordered all 3 officers to place their weapons, handcuffs, and badges on the ground. Cole removed his badge last. The metal landed directly in the puddle of oil where Serena's driver's license had been lying earlier. Minutes later, his wrists were secured in the same handcuffs that had once hung from his belt. Whitfield looked at Cole, her voice cold and flat. "You are not being arrested solely for what you did today." She held up a case file retrieved from the FBI vehicle. "The name Travis Cole has appeared in a months-long investigation into abuse of authority. And after Agent Brooks's distress signal, we just found the missing piece of evidence." Red Hollow Fuel and Mart immediately became a federal crime scene. Technicians retrieved the encrypted recording from Simone's watch and the memory card from the SUV's dashboard camera. The two devices had captured the entire incident from the moment the patrol car began following the sisters to the arrival of the response team. Pike's and Rourke's phones were sealed inside signal-blocking evidence bags before they could delete the photographs. The data recovered later revealed that Serena was not their first victim. The officers' cloud accounts contained numerous images of detainees in handcuffs, forced to kneel or humiliated on the side of the road. The photographs had been shared in a private group chat like trophies. After the indictment was finalized, the video from the gas station was released to the public. The moment that spread most widely was not Simone revealing that she was with the FBI or Cole being placed in handcuffs. It was the footage of Pike reading Gloria's card aloud and laughing at it. Millions of people heard a loving message intended for a mother who had just undergone heart surgery turned into entertainment. Within a single day, people across the country were demanding an investigation into the entire Red Hollow Police Department. The question was no longer what the three officers had done. The question was why they had been able to do all of it openly without any fear of consequences. The FBI searched the department's records room and discovered that Cole had been the subject of 17 complaints involving racial discrimination, violence, and unlawful detention. Pike had previously been accused of throwing a 16-year-old black teenager to the ground, even though the boy had raised both hands. Rourke had once been sued by a woman for conducting an unlawful body search during a traffic stop. The department had investigated every incident itself and concluded that each complaint was unsubstantiated. Body camera footage that might have corroborated the victims' accounts was reported as damaged, missing, or accidentally deleted. Former victims came forward one after another. A teacher, a nurse, and the mother of the teenager whose arm Pike had broken described the same pattern. They were subjected to suspicion, without cause detained for extended periods, forced to place their hands on a vehicle, and accused of resisting when they spoke up. Police Chief Vernon Hale held a press conference and called the conduct of Cole, Pike, and Rourke an isolated incident. 2 days later, records leaked to the press proved that Hale himself had signed off on the dismissal of every complaint. Some reports had been closed before the witnesses were even interviewed. Hale was forced to resign. The town council suspended the department's entire command staff and transferred patrol authority to the state police. A federal grand jury indicted all three officers. At trial, the recording proved that Cole had ordered the vehicle search, the handcuffing, and the second body search. The photographs recovered from the phones showed that Pike and Rourke treated the humiliation of victims like trophies. The activity logs also documented their attempt to delete the images immediately after Simone revealed her identity, providing evidence of obstruction of justice. No one could continue claiming that it had been merely a misunderstanding or a routine search. Serena took the witness stand wearing a black suit. This time she was not seated behind the judge's bench. She was simply a victim describing what it had felt like to be handcuffed too tightly, forced against scorching metal, and held by the back of her neck, while three men laughed. When the prosecutor asked what she had been thinking while Rourke restrained her, Serena looked directly at the jury. "I thought about the women who did not have a sister wearing a distress device," she said. "If they spoke up, would anyone come?" After closing arguments, the jury left the courtroom to deliberate. 1 hour passed, then 3. Simone and Gloria sat behind Serena, the three women holding hands in silence. As darkness began to fall outside, the courtroom door opened. The jury foreperson entered carrying a stack of papers and said, "We have reached a verdict for all three defendants." The jury found Cole, Pike, and Rourke guilty on every federal charge. Cole was convicted of depriving citizens of their civil rights under color of law, directing unlawful searches, conspiring to conceal misconduct, and obstructing justice. Pike and Rourke were convicted of directly using force, violating civil rights, participating in unlawful searches, and attempting to destroy evidence. When the U.S. Marshals placed all three men in handcuffs, the sound of the metal closing was exactly the same as it had been at the gas station. But this time it did not protect power. It forced power to face the consequences. All three were permanently barred from working in law enforcement. The town council voted to dissolve the Red Hollow Police Department and transfer patrol authority to the state police. The Department of Justice reopened every case involving the three officers. People who had once been dismissed as unreliable were contacted, had their records restored, and received assistance in pursuing compensation claims. Standing before dozens of reporters outside the courthouse, Simone said only one sentence: 17 people reported Cole before we did, but the system refused to listen until the 18th victim. Serena returned to the bench, but her rulings on civil rights were no longer built solely from case files. In one decision, she wrote that a badge was a responsibility, not a shield protecting the person who wore it from consequences. The sisters established the Brooks Initiative, which provided free attorneys for victims of police misconduct, recording equipment for communities, and an independent archive for complaints and evidence. Simone brought Cole's 17 case files to a hearing and asked why police departments accused of misconduct were allowed to declare themselves innocent. Gloria watched everything while recovering in the hospital. She was proud not only because her daughters had protected themselves, but because they had finally forced the system to hear the victims who came before them. Several months later, after her health had stabilized, Gloria sat with Simone and Serena outside their old home in Atlanta. They shared a peach pie to replace the one that had never reached the hospital. The card Pike had mocked was preserved in the trial record. Simone still wore the emergency watch, but she no longer regarded it as a symbol of fear. The following morning, the three women prepared for another journey. Gloria asked them to take the route through Red Hollow again. Before the SUV left the driveway, she looked at her daughters. Most people do not have distress devices, federal titles, or an FBI team coming to rescue them. Simone and Serena promised to become a voice for those people. Gloria nodded gently, then said, "You escaped because they did not know whom they were confronting. But how many people out there will never have the chance to reveal an identity that makes the police afraid